introduction on who I am. I'm currently an associate professor of business and program coordinator for our Bachelor of Business Administration program at King University. Our traditional campus since 1867 is up in Bristol, Tennessee. And if you've ever seen that Geico commercial where he's walking down the street and there's the Tennessee and Virginia signs in the middle of the road, that's State Street. Drive up State Street, take a right, that's King's main campus. I'm on our branch campus here in Knoxville. And I've been teaching online part-time, or most of the time, full-time most recently, since 2004. And have had that opportunity to kind of grow up as online education has matured, as the technology and the pedagogy and everything has developed over the past 16 years. And something I've realized since March, working with colleagues and other faculty, is, this is a really steep learning curve if you haven't been doing it. And particularly if you've never even been an online student, much less an online instructor, this is a lot. And it escapes you when you've grown up with the technology, exactly what you're really getting into. But I think we're going to be able to get everybody a good step ahead today, based just on design approach and ideas from what we're talking about. I am a Quality Matters certified online course peer reviewer. This is not a Quality Matters seminar. It's not Quality Matters training, but having gone through certification, the updates to stay certified, I really, really like the Quality Matters approach. And I've integrated a lot of their content and their theory into the way I design my courses. So it's at the root of what we're talking about today. And I like to always, hit what's the main philosophy. My philosophy of online education, I've boiled it down to 4 words: show up, pay attention. And if you do that, the vast majority of students are going to be happy. If you answer emails quickly and you grade in a decent amount of time, the vast majority of students they're going to say, you're a good instructor, this is a good course. And today it's really the pay attention piece is what we're talking about, and the different things we're going to look at. Those elements of design and clear communication, which is the core point of today, that's part of paying attention. It's part of building a good course that's going to be good for your students and easy for them to navigate. So I'd go back far enough in online education when there was still the terminology debate of what do we call this platform that we put stuff on and run courses with. And early days, those of you that remember it, lots of people use the CMS term for content management system. And LMS was sort of the second evolution of the language, where we went from content management to a learning management system. I think that's a really good change of terminology. The point of having one of these things, and some of you have probably seen courses designed this way, right? The picture was selected for a really good reason. I've seen online courses that you open a module and it is like a 3-screen long list of stuff. Like they don't even, compress the stuff into pages or site. It's just, every single thing they can think of, they post as an individual item all the way down the screen. Those are horrible to navigate. It is so hard for students to find what they're trying to do. If anybody's ever tried to teach one of those that was designed by somebody else, I've never had something that bad. I've had some that are pretty rough. And the first thing I do is spend like half a day going in and reorganizing, redesigning to clean things up so I can navigate it and so the students can navigate it. So keep that in mind as you're doing design. It is wonderful to share resources, but we want those resources to be well organized and accessible, and we want them to make sense for our audience, which is our students. So that learning management system, the learning is the important piece. Our goal of the whole thing, the reason that we're doing this, putting things online, is to create engagement. That is absolutely the key to the whole thing. All of us that come from a face-to-face education background, and I did teach face-to-face before I touched online, you know, you've got an engagement goal when you walk into the classroom every day. You plan what you're going to do to get students talking. We've all got our little tips and tricks and the things that we do to hold attention and to get students thinking. That's part of why, as much of it as I've done, I'm still never happy doing stuff like this, because part of my deal when I'm doing face-to-face instruction is I'm a fairly big guy. I've got a decently deep voice, and I hold attention because I move around and I take up physical space. And I can't do that doing webinars. I haven't invested in one of the fancy follow me cameras pacing back and forth, and I don't know that people would appreciate that if I did. But we want to engage. And our experience goal with these online courses, we want students to get engaged with the course and with each other, with their colleagues. They want us engaged with us. We really want them engaged with ideas. And we want them, through that engagement with ideas, to learn new things. Notice I have scratched out, figure out complex navigation. I see that often enough in courses. I really think people believe that's a purpose of is to make it really complex and hard to navigate. I've taken classes like that as a student, that it's like the end of the term and I finally find something that I needed probably before the course started. We don't want complex navigation. Our goal is to simplify and make things easier. So the Quality Matters rubric, this is a higher education rubric that I pulled this from, and before anybody panics and like heads to lunch or whatever's next, I am not going to spend the rest of our talk walking through the 8 general and 40 specific standards. The listing the numbers of those, that's as far as we go as far as the details and Quality Matters. But that's the list of standards for online course review: 8 general, 40 specific. The most common phrase through that whole list, and it's freely available if anyone wants to go pull it for yourself at some point, I think that would be helpful. The most common phrase through all those standards: clearly stated. So think about 48 points that Quality Matters uses to review an online course for whether or not it's quality. The single most common phrase: clearly stated. What we're trying to do with these design approaches is make it easy for students to know what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. And I've got a couple of questions coming in. I think we are going to have discussion at the end of this. When the slides will be shared, I'm going to leave that to our wonderful host. And the where to find Quality Matters, if you just go to the Quality Matters site, and I can't jump out of my presentation to go to the browser right now. I may do that at the end for you. But the Quality Matters website, if you just search Quality Matters standards, you can get in and grab those. You can download as a PDF. Thank you, Lee. There's the link in the chat. I like this. I've got an involved audience that's helping each other out and me. So y'all feel free to keep doing that. I appreciate it. So organization, I believe, equals satisfaction. And there's also never a bad time to put a good dog picture in a presentation as far as I'm concerned. But you really want things organized. And what came to mind while I was thinking about this, I really like to cook. And part of what makes cooking good for me is that I've got my kitchen really organized. I've got laid out kind of like a factory in terms of workspace, equipment, materials. I've got a flow for the kitchen that I can do a ton of stuff in the space that I've got. Part of that's just personal nature. Part of it's the graduate degree in operations management, but it's a well-organized kitchen. It's fun to cook in my kitchen. I absolutely hate going to anybody else's kitchen, because I spend more time digging for stuff and figuring out where the tools are than I do actually getting to work with material and cook. And that really takes the fun out of it for me. What we really want to do with the tools we're going to discuss today and the things we'll get into, we want to be like one of those really nice Airbnb kitchens where you show up and they've gotten the label maker out, and they've got labels on all the drawers and all the cabinet doors, and so you know exactly where you're going. That analogy kind of made me sad because we are not at an Airbnb at the beach this summer for obvious reasons. But hopefully that changes going forward and all of us can travel again. And I think that the analogy might stick, that what you want is a really well-organized kitchen where you can find everything. So 4 ways we do this. Repetition, clarity, multiple approaches, and consistency. Those are the elements that go into a well-organized course. And we'll go through these kind of a piece at a time. And I think you'll find as we talk about it, same thing that occurred to me as I was putting this together. We talk about these as like discrete elements because you have to break it up to make it work at some level, right? That's how we do education. We break things into pieces and look at the parts. In practice, these are really, really symbiotic. These 4 elements all connect to each other, and to a certain level, you need all of them done correctly for any of them to work. So we'll talk about them individually, and then we also are going to kind of see how they come together. So I know I can't see anybody. I'm the only one on camera, but seriously, raise your hand if you've ever seriously been tempted to just set up an autoresponder in your email, especially early in the semester, that just says it's in the syllabus. So that automatically goes out to every single email that comes in for like a week or 2 early in the semester. We know that people don't read the syllabus. And online, honestly, I think it's worse. People tend to, they have more stuff to ignore. So they read even less, I think, sometimes online than they do when they're in class and you hand them a syllabus. Even if they're reading it, this is human nature. You rarely commit something to memory after just seeing it once. And we're all busy. We've all got tons of stuff going on. Repeating things adds emphasis. And that emphasis implies importance. And over time, people will remember what's important. So we want to have repetition in our communication. Due dates, rubrics, directions, contact information. I have more than once over the years gotten email, from a provost or from a dean saying, hey, so-and-so's in your online class and they have a question. Okay. My email and phone number, they're on the syllabus. My email is in the signature block of every announcement I post and every discussion post that I make in the class. There's a button in the LMS that links directly to messaging for me. I don't know why they called the university trying to figure out how to find me, because communication is really important. So I stick that email address everywhere in my courses. The more places it is, the more likely somebody sees it, the more likely they are to accept that and get their hands on it. Best example I've ever seen. I had a communications professor when I was doing my MBA, and she was a PhD in communications. She was married to an engineer, and being a tech guy, I can kind of make fun of my own class of people. Engineers are odd. So are IT guys. But she told us as an example in communication that when she and her husband were dating and getting serious and they'd kind of expressed their feelings for each other, that she was really bothered. And finally, one day just said, why do you never say that you love me? And she said he looked at her and his honest answer was, well, I told you I love you. If that changes, I'll give you an update. We need things repeated, especially the important stuff. We need to repeat. It's, most of us are not digital. So working on a binary system, well, I told you once, and unless I tell you different, that's how it is. It's permanent. That really doesn't work for us as humans. So think about that, when you're dealing with repetition in your courses. The people that you're really close to, if you have told them more than once over the years that you love them, that's because it's important. They need to hear that on a regular basis. Same thing for our course material. So clarity. This is our next piece. Be direct, be succinct. For everybody in the room with a PhD, that second one can be really more challenging probably than anything else. Tell them exactly what they need to do in a direct statement. Don't imply things. Don't assume that they're going to correctly interpret. Put it in black and white specifically. This is excellent educational tactic. In addition to being really good for communicating with students, I think a lot of us in the room probably are aware that the more direct you can be and the more clearly you can state things in a public manner over email or whatever you can do to write that down, the better the odds are you have of surviving an inquiry when a student complains about something. And I've had that happen, that a student's complained, well, they did this. Well, okay, here's the announcement on course policy that says exactly this, and that's exactly what was done in the course. And by the way, that links to the syllabus, and the syllabus quotes the institution policy for it. Okay, you're fine. And we don't like to think about it being strictly just a protect yourself thing, but it does do that. I think more importantly, it makes it easier for the students to get the information. People are not going to read long stuff online. I think we all know that. I think most of us are probably guilty of that. So be succinct, just say what you have to say and get out. The jargon piece, there's sort of a sliding scale for that. You want to minimize overall jargon. You don't want it to read like a technical document. You want it to read so it's somewhat conversational and people can understand it. At the same time, I very much respect the fact that we're in the business of educating students, and we're educating them for whatever our specialty is. And learning the language of a specialty, that's part of the job. So there are times that you very deliberately want to include jargon and announcements in course content because you're orienting people to the field. When you do that, just define it as you go along. And I think that's good practice. And I'm double checking things. And somebody mentioned the Google Voice number. I love Google Voice. That's actually what I use for my my work phone. In part, it keeps you from giving away your personal cell number, and I also get to port that to any digital device I've got. If I've got data, I've got phone access for voice and messaging and all kinds of stuff. Lots of talk about syllabus quizzes, which is really good practice. Make sure they get in and look at it. And office number is an alternative. Office numbers work well. I haven't seen my office in more months than I probably should admit right now because our building's been closed. But you can forward those numbers, so those are good too. Really appreciate the input here and the discussion as we go. And the final piece here on clarity, keep the content discreet. I think we've all seen that stuff that somebody will post a monstrous big long announcement and everything's just jumbled up. Oh well, and by the way, and then you get 3 paragraphs later and they go back to something that started up here, and it's fine to have a larger announcement. If you do that, break it up into sections, throw some headings on it, and just make it really clear. Well, here's where I'm talking about late assignment policy. Here's where I'm talking about rubrics. Here's where I'm talking about requirements for discussion boards. Whatever it is, just throw some headings in, and be nice and concise under that heading for that specific thing. Move on to the next one. Fine to combine things in a single document. Just make it easy to navigate. And the multiple approach piece of this really very much ties into the repetition. Everybody, through practice, through habit, through whatever, they've got their preferences and their habits of what they pay attention to specifically. And within an LMS, it's just like everything else. Some people really read every word of announcements. They don't bother reading introduction posts, or vice versa. Most of the modern LMS platforms give us a ton of different ways to look at information. It is perfectly fine to literally copy and paste and repeat stuff. I do it all the time. I do a weekly announcement for everything that I teach. And basically everything in that weekly announcement is also in an introduction post at the start of every module. Because they need that. That's the, what are we doing this week post? I just put it 2 places. Then pieces of that are in other places. That, stuff about the assignments is also in the assignment post, in addition to being in the intro and an announcement for the week. And text connected to materials or assignments, you can repeat stuff there. Q&A forums are a good place that, when people ask questions, I've found that if you build detailed announcements and detailed introductions, the vast majority of questions you get from students, you literally copy and paste answers because they're asking stuff that you've already written. And I'm never, I never scold students in that, because I don't think that's appropriate to do in a public forum. But when they ask, I go and I copy and I just paste it in and say, here it is. If you got any other questions, please feel free to follow up. But it saves me a ton of time because I've already written it. It's kind of just, it's distressing they haven't read it, but I've written it all, paste and just drop it in. And now the consistency piece. I'm taking a look here. Jack makes a really good point that you can break those announcements up into a sequence of shorter ones. And I do that some. And there are obviously multiple ways to do that too. That's a good point. And syllabus portions, as far as corresponding areas, I think that's perfectly fine. If you keep a good schedule table at the end of your syllabus, that's what I do with mine. I could definitely see just copy and paste that syllabus in your introduction to the course, not the syllabus, that table from the syllabus into your welcome to the course. Hey, here's everything we're going to do for the next 5, 7, 15 weeks, whatever your terms are. If you've got an honor code or an integrity statement for the academic integrity, I think it'd be fine to just copy, paste that at the end of the directions for every assignment. Stuff like that I think would be really effective. So the consistency piece, time that students spend looking for stuff is time that they're not learning. It's wasted time. I'm also a big fan of Lean Six Sigma. Unnecessary movement, unnecessarily material handling are big sources of waste in organizations, and looking for stuff is a waste of time. And I don't like wasting time. I don't like to make my students waste time. So the more consistent you can be with your structure, the easier it is for them to find stuff, especially once they've oriented to the way things are done. In a perfect situation, and I have seen some of this personally, you've got a master shell for the institution or for the program within the institution, and every single course in that program has the same layout. Now, that in no way restricts what you can do for content or how you assess or how you teach. That's very much up to the individual instructor. But if you've got a really consistent layout with every course of where's the syllabus, where do my announcements go, where do I turn stuff in, where do I find presentations, where do I do whatever. Once students are a week or two into the first class, they can navigate everything from start to finish without thinking. If you don't have that institution-wide or department-wide, and a lot of places don't, you can at least be very consistent with your course, so that once they get used to things in the first week, they can dependably see everything the same way for the rest of the course. And where do you put information? Are assignment directions posted as their own thing, or do you post assignment directions with the link where they upload the assignments. They can pull directions there. Talking about being, having repetition and putting things in multiple places. Personally, I'm a fan of putting it in a couple of places. But where is it? Wherever it is for week 1, do that every single week. Have the same order of stuff through the module. If your PowerPoint presentations that you share are at the top of the module, put them there every week. If graded assignments are at the bottom of the module, put them at the bottom of the module every week. So there's not a delay in the students finding where things can go. I admit that personally, I'm a little bit obsessive compulsive. So this is, very much habit for me, but it's also established as very good instructional design. It is a best practice for instructional design. I've been an online student in courses that were like that and courses that were not. The courses that were not, I found very frustrating because I was constantly looking for stuff. We'll take a look at our Q&A here. Links. We're going to get to the links part in a minute. So that's a perfect segue to what we're going to get into later. And the it's in the syllabus, I'm going to say that really depends on what your institution is and how things are at your institution. The places I've been, we tend to be much more student focused, isn't really the word, but that there's more than a little pressure on the instructors to be very friendly and open and say, well, here it is. And my personal preference ideally is to say, well, that was actually covered in the syllabus, or that was posted as part of course policies. Tell them where that is, and then I copy and paste it. So I let them know, hey, it's here if you'll just go look at it. But at the same time, they get an answer to their message. Personally, I found that to be best practice. That tends to keep the students happy. It tends to keep my dean happy. But that varies depending on where you're at. I also think it varies by level. I'm a lot more prone to tell a grad student, well, you need to go find that. Searching for it is part of the process. You need to do the research. I think that's a lot more appropriate generally for grad students than it is for undergrads, especially if it's an underclassman versus an upperclassman in undergrad. So that changes a little bit. As far as having things up before the class starts, absolutely. The standard where I've worked is that online courses, all the online material usually is accessible to students a week or so before the actual start date of the course. I like having everything up from the start, and that I think allows the student to do planning and get ready for the course so they walk in really ready to go. And there are exceptions to that. It's perfectly fine if you want to have quizzes or certain assignments released based on a timed basis because they need to be sequential. There are pedagogical reasons not to release everything up front, but I think a lot of the content, it's good to have it as open as you can on the front end. And David's absolutely right. School-wide, department-wide standards, they don't always completely fit. I think as much as we can do, to standardize, that's good, but I do not question at all the fact that there are elements that need to be different sometimes. So as much as I like consistency, to be effective, we have to be flexible with our consistency. That may be about as clear as mud, but it's just, we're not a production line. We have to have some flexibility. And folks, I'll tell you, I love the questions. I think I'm going to jump back in here and kind of finish out my stuff, and then we'll get into active discussion to close things out because I want to make sure we've got plenty of time at the end. So, some technical tips. I am an old IT guy. I had to do something technical or this just wasn't going to feel right. And I said to an earlier question, this was in here, I like putting navigation links into announcements. Module introductions, anywhere I can put a link. And that functionality varies depending on the platform you're on. Personally, I work in Canvas. Canvas makes this very easy to do, to do links within the course. So, when I do my announcement and my module introduction for every module, if I talk about, the PowerPoint presentations as in, hey, you need to review these presentations, I make that a link to the page where I've got the presentations for that week. When I talk about the discussion module in the introduction, discussing what we need to do in terms of activities and graded content, discussion 2 is a hyperlink within the course straight to that discussion forum. Same thing for graded announcements, external materials, anything I can link to so that they can start in one place and jump directly to where they need to be rather than having to back out and go back in. Anything I can do with that, I always put links in. I really like having assignment deadlines connected to a calendar application. And most platforms, this is an automatic thing. But generally, when you go in and actually manually set the deadlines for assignments rather than just listing, hey, this is when this is going to be due, it gives you information on whether or not it's late because it'll automatically get flagged. You can set, stuff in terms of automatic deductions, or you can set, cutoff dates that they won't take stuff, things like that. What's more important, I think, is that generally once you've got deadlines set and programmed into the assignments on the courses, those pop up as a to-do list, as they've got a course calendar the students can look at and they see everything that's coming up. Several now will, if the student knows how to get into it, they can go in and actually download an iCal file or some other kind of link that they can actually just add everything from the course to their personal calendar. And I did some professional development courses a couple of years ago. Every class had an iCal link. I dropped that into my Google Calendar. Loved having everything from the course automatically feed into my Google Calendar where I assemble everything else in my life. So stuff like that's really good. I'm also a big fan of single sign-on. So if you've got the option in your LMS to either give a link to a video that goes out to YouTube, Vimeo, Dailymotion, someplace like that, or embedding the video with the code, I really, really like to do the embed thing. I think that if anything they can do inside the LMS that saves them having to go out and come back, I think it saves a little bit of time. It keeps their focus where they need to be. So a few personal favorites. I always tell people, if you're working with technology, if what you're doing is the easy way, you're probably doing it correctly. So if you're saving time, I think you're right where you need to be. Most LMSs will let you set a timed release on announcements. Every class that I teach, face-to-face or online, I do a lot of stuff the same for both mediums. I write all my announcements before the class starts. And I do a minimum of one a week. I always do a, hey, welcome to week 2, welcome to week 3. Here's all the stuff we're going to do. I've got the hyperlinks in there. And I set a timed release so that they post, and usually they post like 11:59 p.m. on Sunday before the new week starts on Monday, so that they're at the top of the announcement feed for the student at the start of the week. I find that if I don't do that up front, I get busy and just the crush of an active term. You're grading and answering questions and doing other things. You've got deadlines for stuff that you're writing to publish and everything else. I have good intentions to post every week and I forget. So I set everything up ahead of time. I do a timed release. They show up when they're supposed to without me having to touch it. I think that's a lot more effective for me. And now if something comes up, if I get 2 or 3 questions, they're the same question, I'll go in and post an announcement and say, hey, I've gotten several questions, so here's information or here's another resource. One of the things I really like is within modules, and this is, I do this specifically in Canvas. It works generally in other LMS platforms too. I create text headers to break the module up into chunks so that they can see the different sections, clearly, hey, this is learning materials, this is graded assignments, this is these things. The third one, I actually stole this from our director of online learning at King, Dr. Amy Mann, who's fantastic to work with. I had a question about a course, and she was working on one of hers. I was like, hey, that's nice. Her graded assignments text header, which I was already using. She just goes in and sticks an extension in the text header that says due Sunday, August, whatever, by 11:59 p.m. So the date's on the calendar. This gets into that repetition thing again. The date's posted everywhere in the course, but it's on the text header. They don't have to look at a calendar or even open the assignment to see a deadline. It's just right there. So I do that with all my assignments now. I always do directions, rubrics, reference materials, all that stuff in the same place the assignment submitted. So they click the assignment link, all that stuff is there. It also tends to be other places, but I like having everything right there with the assignment. And I've said before in here that I duplicate my content between announcements and the module introductions. So at this point, I think we'll get out of this. I'm going to stick around for live discussion, and we'll go back to the big video. But that's my direct link to my LinkedIn profile, and I'm happy to stick around as long as folks have got questions this afternoon to talk live. But please feel free to add me, message me there, connect after the fact, and I'm happy to be in touch with you after this is over. And I'm also going to throw that link directly into our Q&A chats. You'll have it there, just copy and paste. So at this point, I think we'll exit out of the slides and we'll see where the discussion's going.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Caudill. I love that you got to some questions already. We do have quite a few more though. Let's see. How do some of the issues change in synchronous teaching versus asynchronous?
And that's a really good question. And let me, while I'm thinking about it, let me go ahead and get my link thrown in here. Where's my, there we go. Okay. So that link is in the chat, which is separate from the Q&A box. I'm having to learn how to navigate. This is a bit different than my usual Zoom interface. But so differences in questions, synchronous versus asynchronous, that was the question, right?
Yeah, she said these issues, and if she wants to come back and specify what issues those might be, that would maybe be a good idea, but you could answer for questions.
Sure. And here's the thing, I've found over the years that the more attention I've put into my course design online, the more I've found that the stuff I do for online courses also applies to all my face-to-face courses. So at King, we've got what are called course owners for the School of Business. You've got somebody that maintains they call the blueprint and Canvas, the course shell for the class. And we do, the textbook updates and all that stuff. We design and update the course. I don't do separate shells for face-to-face and online anymore. I have a blueprint, and all the materials I put online, those are all available for face-to-face students. So, videos, tutorials, all the extra stuff that we traditionally have done online, I give my face-to-face students access to every bit of it. About the only change is that the online discussions get turned off for face-to-face because you do those in class. So there really is not much difference. And I've personally found, and I haven't done research on it, but personal experience, my face-to-face students like having the additional content available because it's more for them to look at in between classes and stuff they can go back and use. So I think if you're using an LMS, design your face-to-face just like you're designing your online.
Awesome, thank you so much. How do you set an automatic timed release?
It varies a little bit, obviously, by platform. All of them I've seen are about the same. Generally, when you go in and create your announcement, if you scroll down to the bottom of that screen where you create your announcement before you save, there will be, and it'll be different language, but set for release or hold until, something like that, and there'll be a little calendar icon, and you can pick a date, set that date, and then save. And as a rule, when you go and look at your announcements, like when you pull up the announcement page, you'll have a little note next to the delayed one saying available on, and it'll have some future date there. So you can, after you set it, you can look at your page and confirm that they have been, set for a delayed release.
Awesome, thank you. Do you give students an orientation to the LMS and course the first week of class, or do they do this outside of the class?
They generally do that outside. I have started, and well, the background of this doesn't really matter. I've had some situations where we've had largely face-to-face students who, for various reasons, have had to do an online. With that, and I'm adopting it for everything, I have started consistently posting a link to a how to succeed online tutorial that just hits the high points that a lot of us are probably familiar with on, setting schedules and having regular work times for your course, and, schedule to have the assignment done ahead of the due date. So if something goes wrong, you're not, in a bad spot, stuff like that. So I don't do as much like specific, hey, this is the LMS, because that tends not to be necessary in my situation. But I am paying more attention, especially recently, given the way things have shifted, to giving them some good, here's how to be a good online student material.
That's great, thank you. Someone had a suggestion. They use Remind app. They said it's a great way to reach your students and for them to reach you by texting. Your phone number and their phone numbers are kept private, and students love it since they text more often than they email nowadays.
That's an excellent, I had heard of that. I never have played with it, but I may, I want to write that down literally, because writing stuff down puts it in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
And I may be doing that this fall. So whoever offered that.
And it's free, they just said.
Well, free is better. I'm in higher education for a living, so that fits my budget perfectly.
All right, so someone was wondering if you could share the link on how to succeed online. Whether we have time to do that now, you can also get that to me after this, and I can share it with the recording to this webinar, if that's easier for now.
I'm an old IT guy, like I said, so cross your fingers, and I think hopefully I can both talk and pull this up and copy and paste it.
Awesome, then he will put that in the chat for everyone to see. Let's see. Is embedding video ADA compliant? Will it allow for closed captioning?
That is an excellent question. To my understanding, and YouTube is my primary go-to for that content. YouTube videos that are closed captioned, when you embed them, that closed captioning comes with the video. So if it's closed captioned on YouTube, it will be closed captioned when it's embedded. So that carries over. I can't speak to other platforms because I haven't really done other platform stuff with as far as video. So that's definitely worth looking at, but that is a very important point that we want to be really careful and make sure that when we're doing this stuff, all of our accessibility issues are maintained, regardless of how we're posting this stuff. So thank you for that question.
Leading into that, how does one embed media versus provide a link?
That is usually, and if anybody wants to open the chat, hopefully that's the correct link. That's the online learning keys to success video that I'm using in some of my courses. I managed to actually be able to talk and somewhat make sense and also pull that out of my course. I'm feeling pretty good about that for Friday afternoon. The embed feature, generally the way that works is if you set up in it either a page or an announcement, either way, you'll have a toolbar above that block where you're able to type material. And that toolbar often will have, and the title on it varies by platform, but usually something called external tools, something similar to that you can click that and it will have a tool to be able to go in, and if you have like the URL for a video, you just enter that, you copy and paste that URL into the external tool for a video option, and the LMS will automatically embed the video on the page rather than back in the day, I remember having to go in actually get the HTML codes and do that stuff, which thankfully we really don't have to do anymore. It's usually an external tool option within that tool menu on the page that you're creating in the LMS, and it'll just ask for a URL and the LMS will do the rest for you. So it's fairly straightforward most of the time.
Awesome, thank you. Another video related question, what about copyright when embedding YouTube videos? Not all videos available to embed are public domain or Creative Commons.
That's a very good question. I wish I had my business law friend here for a more informed opinion. In practice, which may or may not necessarily be entirely legal, in practice, because you're not saving a video file locally and then privately sharing that. The link is just feeding information from the public site onto a page. So you're not actually capturing or owning any content. If the owner of that information wants to make it a private page, or they want to delete it, or they do anything else, when they do that, it also disappears from your page because you're feeding live from that public site. I think you're pretty much fine there. Because of that, the content creator still retains full rights to do what they want to with the video. That said, if you've got serious concerns, talk to whoever your copyright person is at your university or your attorney, because I've got a pile of degrees like most of you do, but none of them are in law. So that hopefully gets me off the hook in case somebody gets in trouble.
Someone said copyright protects educational use as long as you don't save it from semester to semester or permanently store it. You can use it like sharing a chapter of a book in class for one day.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Thank you for that addition. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Professor Hall. Professor Aronson, do you record your own videos? I sometimes voice over PowerPoint to explain complex ideas that I feel benefit from my own voice inflections.
On occasion, and I've actually done I've done more tutorial work since March than I have in a long time, because King's a relatively small institution. Everybody wears a lot of hats, and me being a tech guy, I've been doing a lot of support for our faculty and for our students. In terms of stuff for classes, I occasionally do it. Honestly, one of the reasons I don't do it more is that there is so much good relevant content already out there that I'll grab stuff from YouTube and drop it in, which prevents me from having to, it prevents me from having to do it from scratch when somebody good has already done it. I also really like that because, like I said, everything I do is common between my online and my face-to-face. For my face-to-face students, I think it's kind of nice for them to have another voice other than me when they're looking at stuff. And for me personally, and this varies depending on where you're at and the way your institution's structured, I don't have a really routine set of classes that I teach. I've got the certifications to teach a bunch of different stuff, and I just put a portfolio together and submit to the university so I have the number in my head. In 7 years, I've taught 19 classes. I'm designing a brand new one that I'm launching and teaching the first time this coming semester. And that's part of why I don't do more of my own authored content. Is if I had 2 to 4 classes that were regular rotation for me that I really got to dive into and play with all the time, I would probably do more. The fact that I basically never have the same semester and I'll teach one that may be 3, 4, 5 semesters. I'll do it again at some point, which point's different book, different layout. That need to stay flexible and just the variety of stuff I teach, it doesn't really work for me to do a lot of media creation because then I end up not using it again until it has to be updated. Just a personal thing for me.
Awesome. From Professor Dodge, it seems to me that students need better time management skills for online than for face-to-face. How do you say that without offending students who are disorganized?
And how do you say anything without offending somebody in this day and age that we're living in? If anybody can figure that out, please let me know, and then promptly start selling it, because I think it'll make a mint. But I generally try to emphasize the advanced planning. Several of my courses have got long-term projects, and in my announcements and under assignments, I put something every week. Hey, remember, the end of the course, you have this major project coming up. You need to be consistently working. Hey, we're in week 3. That means you should be about here on your long-term project by now, but there's still time. But I do stuff like that to write it as a friendly reminder, and yet emphasize the fact that, hey, pay attention. And I think the deadline posts and having stuff on calendars, I think that has a lot of the same impact. That when they're when they read the announcement and then they look at the text header in the module, and then they've got the calendar, and then they've got the pop-up from the LMS that are all saying, hey, this is due in 3 days. I think that has a lot of the same impact on the student of, oh, I probably need to do that and not let it get past me.
Do you have any guidance for ESL courses where the language of the LMS is not the student's first language?
That sadly is very much outside my scope of practice. It's an excellent question, and I can definitely see where there's some challenges there, but it's not something I've personally had my hands on. I'm sorry.
Well, if anyone else has any experience with that they would like to share in the Q&A, I can definitely read it out for everyone to hear.
And please do, because I'd like to learn too.
Yeah, definitely. Do you find you have to reopen closed forums or assignments for students with excuses? And how does this disrupt your original organization? Or is the solution to simply have very strict deadlines?
I have gotten in the habit, and this goes back to you need to be consistent, but sometimes there's a need for flexibility. The way I've set things up at this point is I set things up, I've got a deadline, I've got a late penalty, and then I've got a point that, past this time, you're just not able to turn anything in. And that day and hour that you can't turn it in for credit anymore, I have the assignment automatically turn off. I set an end date for the assignment availability. Very rarely is that an issue. On occasion, it's come up where, I had a student that, and no names, no courses, so I think I'm safe as far as FERPA. But I had a student badly injured in a course this summer, and like in the hospital, and then recovering and on meds and unable to access the course for a while. And, for them, I worked. I just worked around it. They were in touch with me. They let me know what was going on. I said, hey, tell me when you're ready. And when you're ready, I'll open things up, give you access. You can get in. We'll help you. Either we'll finish it up this term, or if that doesn't work, we'll do an incomplete, and then we'll work it out as an incomplete. So, I'll obviously, when an emergency happens, I'll work around that stuff. But handful of times over the years have I had to go in and open anything, versus just saying, well, policy's policy, folks. I've also got a really supportive dean who's big on academic rigor, and if it's a clearly stated policy in the syllabus and the student's late and there's not an excuse beyond, well, it's hunting season. I was out shooting ducks and I forgot about it. Well, that's not a valid excuse. So I've got a dean that supports me saying, no, you said it was closed, it's closed. So that helps too.
Awesome. We have a few responses about the ESL question from Professor Elise. A lot of Dr. Caudill's advice about clarity works. Simple sentences with clear instructions help. Repetition of instructions is helpful. In addition, consistent format helps. And if you can do videos, they said that we use VidGrid that explains each assignment, or even how the LMS works in your orientation, which is really helpful. And they also provided their email address if you would like more help.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Professor Elise. And another professor, I usually put a statement in my syllabus and remind students that if English is not their first language, they should feel free to bother me for anything they don't understand, whether it is from the material or the LMS. All right. What if a student submits the wrong file? You would not see that until after the deadline.
And traditionally what I've done is just, I've sent feedback through the LMS saying, hey, this isn't the right file. If you'll upload it, if the assignment's still open, if you'll upload it, I'll accept it for full credit without a penalty, or alternatively, they can email it to me. I'm also enough of a stickler that, if I have a suspicion something is weird, I will go in and look at the document properties. And if the created date on the metadata for the file is after the deadline, then I can ask some general questions. But I mean, almost never has that actually been an issue for me. I usually just send feedback, and occasionally there's panic because I have learned from experience, if I just post feedback, they end up not looking at it. But if I post a 0 so that it pops on the grade book and they get the announcement, hey, you've got a grade and it's a 0, and then in the feedback say, this is not the final grade. I think you've uploaded the wrong file. If you'll upload the correct one, I'll accept it. Usually I've got to put some kind of placeholder in for the grade, otherwise they don't log in to look at the content.
Awesome, thank you. Since we're getting close to 2, we'll take just a few more questions. And if your question hasn't been answered at the end, feel free to reach out to Dr. Caudill if you would like. What's your approach on giving exams online?
I generally, and part of this boils down to just the nature of what I teach. Generally I'll put in, a time limit, and I use the old technical tools that, the order of the questions will, be randomized by the system. The order of answers for multiple choice tests will be randomized by the system. Personally, I use those kind of assessments generally sort of a knowledge check sort of thing. I'm mostly information systems and management. Those are my primary disciplines. And, in terms of the more heavily weighted material, I'm much more prefer doing projects and major papers and research, assignments and things like that. So it's more of a performance thing than it is an exam structure. So I generally use quizzes to check for content knowledge, and then for application knowledge, it's problem sets and things like that that are not a log on and doing a timed environment sort of assignment.
Okay, so there were a couple of different requests for specific examples of your own design, such as headers and your module. If you would like to either pull that up, if you can do that quickly, or send that to me in a document and I can host that alongside the recording, which we will send to everyone in attendance.
I can, give me just a second. I'm gonna grab one of the courses that'll work a little bit better. That one's
awesome.
One I've currently got under development. It's not going to work because I'm doing everything offline for the moment. Let me.
Mm-hmm. In the meantime, how do you reduce cheating?
And that's it. That's the big question for everything online, isn't it? For assignments and exams, and for exams for timed performance things, I set things up so that they can look at their responses once, and after that one review, they can't get back into it. So it limits their ability to log in and grab stuff and save it and then share it. Written assignments, I do use plagiarism detection software, which I'm not thrilled with using personally, but there's so much out there in terms of what is available online that's written by students. Early in my online teaching career, it was pretty easy that I could look at something and say, oh, that's obviously not student writing. I'd Google it, and it's plagiarized. It's taken from a different source. Now you've got all these places that sell student papers, so it it sounds like a student paper because it is. So I've got to use the software now. And I've got a course pulled up if you want me to do a quick screen share and take a look. Is this a good time, or do we want to do another question and then go to that?
Let's do one question real fast and then head into that.
Okay.
If I teach 2 classes, one online in the morning and one in the afternoon, how can I record the morning lecture and use this record in the afternoon or another day?
Depends on your platform. I know that both Zoom and Microsoft Teams, which seem to be the leading conference softwares right now, both of those have a recording option, and those process pretty quickly. I've used them. So you do have the option to just record that session, and then you can replay it. Point of, kind of a picky pedagogy point that may or may not be welcome to hear, but best practice for video online, for lectures and that kind of thing is 10 minutes. So you're generally, if you're going to record and then just share recordings, you're much better off doing multiple 10 or less minute videos and kind of hitting on a single point or a couple of related points in 5 to 10 minutes. Make that a single video, then do another one. All the research says past 10 minutes, even people that really want to pay attention start fading. So, rather than recording a whole live online lecture, because stuff like this is a little different, because we're live and we've got some interactivity and people can ask questions and it's not just me talking for an hour. Technically, yeah, you can record, you can share that, and there are places that's appropriate, but I would be wary of recording like a 50-minute lecture and then just sticking that up there. As a reference, it's good. As a primary learning material, probably not.
All right, thank you so much for that. Do you want to share your screen and show the examples now?
Yeah, I'll pull this up. And for the record, since this is being recorded and it's going to be everywhere, this is a blueprint. This is a course design class. So there are no and there have never been any students or any student content in this. So I think I'm safe with FERPA. We're not going to have any problems with that. So this is, and class to class, mine change a little bit as I go, but like this is one I designed 3 years ago. We've actually stopped offering it now. I've started adding a learning materials header to most of my active ones now. So I'll have a course overview. I'll have an introduction, and so I'll have that introduction. I'll have like learning materials for tasks and readings and stuff like that. But you'll see I've got the text header for graded assignments, and this is the Canvas LMS. Canvas allows you to indent. So generally what I'll do is a text header, then I'll indent the stuff under that header to make it just visually kind of offset and you can clearly see where things are. And I was talking earlier about, this is one of those classes with a major project. Future assignments, start work now. And I've got information on the project, how to plan for the midterm in this case. And graded assignments, because this is a blueprint, there are not dates listed because this is what loads every term. Once the blueprint loads, what I'll do is just go in, edit this header, and it'll be graded assignments - due, date, time, and I'll do that, rolling through. And then as you'll notice, I've consistently got same order of content, same headers, same indents, so that everything's nice and consistent for the students. So hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much. There's still so many questions, but unfortunately we're out of time today. So thank you everyone so much for coming. Thank you, Dr. Caudill, for that presentation and all of those great answers for the questions. If your question wasn't answered or you have any other questions, please direct those either to Jason Caudill, the LinkedIn that we have in the chat, or you can email them to us, marketing@hawkslearning.com, and we'll help you find your answer. We will be emailing you a link to view this webinar on demand once that recording becomes available. Thank you again, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
And these tend to be only as good as the audience, and we've had great questions. We've had, some of you sharing information that I've learned a thing or two along the way, which I always really like to do. So thank you to all of you that dialed in and joined us today, and for the great questions. You've made me think, so I've had a lot of fun, and look forward to connecting and hearing from some of you after the fact too. Feel free to reach out anytime you want to.
Thank you so much, everyone. Goodbye.